What's up, YouTube? Hi, and welcome to today's rendition of Gods Unchained Market Watch. I'm your host, Juju, and today we're going to go over all of the notable market changes that had happened over this past week in Gods Unchained. So, before we begin, let's address the elephant in the room. Sleep 2.0 has been announced. How do I feel about it? I have mixed feelings. I understand that mass sleep is super broken, but I also understand that targeted sleep, like the deception sleep cards, are probably going to get really nerfed. In my opinion, with the sleep mechanic, the only problem cards were Demogorgon and Siren of the Grave, because they freeze the board essentially. And with the targeted sleep spells like Sleep Dart or the Satyr Hypnotist or something like that, the 2-mana 2/2 and the Deception that randomly chooses a minion to sleep every turn. I think they're viable options for counterplay. It's just Siren of the Grave and Demogorgon that was really the problems, because when you put a creature to sleep, there's really no interaction there. It wasn't really too bad. I mean, they're powerful, but I don't know if they were powerful enough to rework the whole mechanic. I think a nerf to Siren of the Grave or Demogorgon would have been good, but I know the devs don't want to nerf Genesis cards directly nerf Genesis cards in order to reward people who were there at the beginning of the game. So it is what it is. That's the reality of playing a game like this. We're always going to be subject to nerfs, and cards' values are going to be subject to nerfs as well. So it's just like any TCG where there's a ban list or there's a rotation coming out. The value will always decrease when the card's use decreases. So keep that in mind as we go through this, yeah? But yeah, maybe these changes aren't for sure. They're only announced on the PTR, so there is room for maybe like changing or unchanging. But if you have any thoughts about sleep, go ahead and leave your comments in the comment section below. But yeah, it is what it is. That's all we can really do. As far as I'm concerned, I'm still gonna support the devs in whatever direction they choose to help the game out. We just gotta trust that it's good for them. Honestly, guys, devs have a really hard time balancing games, so let's do our part in the community to like back them up and give them support when possible. Of course, voice our opinions, but no flaming. Don't do that. That's unhealthy. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Just remember, devs are people too. If you're unhappy with the changes, don't lash out and be angry. But if you're happy with the changes, then let them know. As for me, I'm taking a wait and see approach. We never really know. Cool. With that being said, let's go ahead and get started. So first up, we have Siren of the Grave. We naturally see a dip here. Yep. It went from 0.01 ETH all the way down to 0.007 ETH. It's a pretty big decrease, but we do see an increase in volume actually. So a lot of people are buying these. This could be a good play depending on whether or not these changes go through, because Sleep 2.0 is still in the PTR. But for the most part, yeah, if you want to cash in on copies of Siren of the Grave, or if you want to buy some copies, this is a great time. Next up, we have Sulfuric Rain, which is another buying opportunity. We do see a decrease in price right over here from 230 to 163, lowest being 160 right now. This card is still good in my opinion. It's not affected by sleep because it doesn't have sleep, but it is indirectly affected by the sleep nerf because of it combos well with Siren of the Grave. However, it is still like a form of removal and a form of cycle, so still a decent card in my opinion. Next up, we have Necronomics. Good old Necronomics. We saw a spike last week, and it's currently found support at this level, which is pretty nice in my opinion. It's at $19 right now. And the average price today was $18.04. So very good card. It activates. I mean, it's 1 mana for 5 mana. So you're basically playing this card to get 4 mana, which is busted in my opinion. Great card for tempo plays. Also a combo initiator or a combo. What's the word? Activator. Not an activator, but it extender. It extends combos essentially. So really good card. Not much to say here. Okay, now we see a Skull Scepter buyout right here. We do see an increased volume in play, or in activity, and we also see wow, like a big increase in price actually. It jumps from 370 to 850, and now it's hovering around that 828 price. The card is good. I mean, it's you know, you can use it for Bombi OTK or Corpse Explosion OTK, whatever you want to call it. Really good card if you want to activate Frenzy. I've also, believe it or not, I've also seen this in high performing mythic decks. I believe in November there was an aggro death deck that focused on summoning a bunch of minions, ran Expectant Chicken and Demonic Offering, and used Skull Scepter as a way to add on extra burn. It's really easy to underestimate the chip damage you get from Skull Scepter, but actually the chip damage you get can be pretty significant, especially in decks that can do a lot of damage really fast and can summon a lot of minions, right? So this card is definitely something to consider when running an aggro deck if you're not running Necroceptor already. And if you don't want to go the Necroceptor route, this is probably a must include then. But yeah, very good card. Super. It's been flying under the radar, but it's definitely a good card if you can afford to play a relic in this slot. And the synergy, it synergizes well. You wouldn't want to play this in a control deck for sure, but it has places in aggro decks. Next up, we have a little bit of a buyout with Thankaris Spell Locust. This is a 3-mana 1/3 with Deadly Afterlife. At the end of your start of your next turn, choose and obliterate a card in your hand, then summon this creature from the void. I'm going to go ahead and check out my volume real quick. There we go. All right. Thank you. Shout out to Voice Meter. All right. But I like this card. It's free tempo every turn as long as it dies. The drawback is you obliterate a card from your hand, but at least you get to choose, which gives you some sort of agency. And then it's free tempo every turn, essentially. You're basically getting a free 1/3. Even though 1/3 is kind of 1 mana worth of stats, at least you get a deadly. So, I don't know. It could create a lot of value. There are a lot of situations where it can create value. Is it broken? Absolutely not, but it's definitely a good card. Next up, we have a spike in the price of Ares Peacemaker. Thank gosh. Okay, so I've been saying this for quite a while now, but Ares Peacemaker is a very good card, especially in Board Wipe Death, or basically any deck that runs Nefer's Khopesh. It's a free board clear, and the best part is it activates on your turn. So the turn the effect goes off, you have a free board. So it's a free tempo swing if you can get the effect off. If you play this raw on 4 mana, and you're against an aggro deck, the aggro player has to make a decision whether or not to waste 7 damage and kill this card, or go face and sacrifice their board in the process, right? So saves you health, buys you a turn, and if they kill it, you have Nefer's Khopesh to try it again, and establish another threat. So very good card. Of course, if you run it with Hippocrate's Monster, you'll have to weigh the options. But honestly, if I have both Ares Peacemaker and Hippocrate in the grave, I'm not mad at resummoning either both, especially since Nefer's Khopesh has, like, you can build up so much durability on it. Very good card in my opinion. Should be a must include in Board Wipe Death. Yeah, it's such a it's such a good card with Nefer's Khopesh. That's all I have to say. But we did see a price spike from $4 all the way to $6.98, with it hovering around the $7 mark, which is really nice. Cool. So next up we have Burrowing Scarab, which also saw a price spike and a buyout. 110 copies were bought on the 29th. That's pretty crazy. So value for sure. 2 mana, 1/1. Both players draw a card. Draw 2 cards. Sorry. If you are okay with giving your opponents cards, this is great value for what it is. It's basically Cold Light Seer in Hearthstone, or Cold Light Oracle in Hearthstone, but 1 mana less and 1/1 less of stats. Overall, it's great draw engine when combined with Canopic Hoarder and Half-Life. Honestly, the card is really good. Okay, next up we have a spike in Guardian of the Underworld. This is an 8 mana frontline, deal X damage to your god, where X is the number of creatures in your opponent's void. 13/17. 13/17 is a crazy amount of stats for an 8 mana card. Of course, it's going to depend on the matchup, how much damage you take. So, I mean, if you're playing a Necroceptor Death deck that spawns a lot of zombies and you kill a lot of zombies, you're going to take a boat ton of damage. But if you're playing like a control deck that doesn't really summon any monsters, like Board Wipe Death, for example, you can definitely take advantage of this card. I think the card is good. In certain decks, the biggest drawback is that it's 8 mana, really, because 8 mana is 12 turns worth of waiting, and you have to survive those 12 turns. But if you can, and you can play this card, you're most likely going to do really well that game, unless your opponent has some kind of hard removal like a Reap, or maybe they use I'm losing my train of thought. The 1 mana spell in Light that obliterates a card with Order. That would feel really bad to lose to this, but yeah, honestly, if you get it off, it's a big threat for sure. And if your opponent doesn't have any hard removal to deal with this, you're most likely winning the game. Cool. Next up, we have Nether's Advocate. This is a 2 mana 1/1. Summon a 3/2 experimental outcome. I mean, it was bought out earlier this week, spiked almost at 0.0007 ETH, which is about what, 183. We do see the increase in activity. Also, I do think this card is good. It's a 2 mana 4/3 worth of stats. The 2 mana 1/1 is definitely underwhelming, but because it summons a 3/2 once it dies, there are some implications with it, especially if you're running a deck that runs a lot of those destroy a monster cards, like Untold Greed, or maybe some other card that kills a minion and does some crazy effect. So this could definitely see play in one of those decks. Cool. Next up, we have a spike in Mark of Death. It went all the way to, let's see, 6 cents. Oh, whopping 6 cents. Back down to 4. I like the card. We do see a crazy amount of increased activity here. 495 copies were bought on January 29th. This card is good, in my opinion. I think in token zombie decks, or just decks that summon a lot of minions and need to keep a lot of minions on board, this card does really well. It also has a blast effect, which is kind of nutty, in my opinion, because you can do a lot of things with it. You can summon the zombie, you can get favor to get cards from the Sanctum, you can deny your opponent favor. You can also get the blessed effects that do damage to your opponent but give them favor as well, and that could be helpful in some aggro version decks. I like the card. It's a lot of value for 2 mana, especially if you have a board, if you're running a deck that naturally summons a lot of creatures. So yeah, great card. Oh, and it also works with the Corpse Explosion OTK for the full combo. It could do like 50 damage with double Corpse Explosion, Mark of Death, Necronomics, and Skull Scepter. Very good card, in my opinion. I can understand the buyout, but I mean, it's a common in Divine Order. There are a lot of copies, so it doesn't make sense here. Cool. Next up, we're going to go with the Deception cards while I open all the Magic cards that are going on right here. So first up, we have Mimicus, and this is a 1 mana 1/1. At the end of your turn, while this creature is in your hand, transform it into a creature in your opponent's hand. It keeps this ability after the change. So basically, when I look at this card, I think of free information. If I have this card in my hand, I'll be able to see what cards my opponent is holding. This has some implications in slower matchups like control matchups, but it could also be used against aggro decks too, right? Because I mean, if you're running a control deception deck, you have Mimicus in hand. It turns into like a Pyramid Warden, for example. You can drop down the Pyramid Warden and fight for board that way. Yeah, if you're playing playing against a control deck and you have Mimicus, you can try to snipe one of their power cards and have it turn into their power card and then play it the next turn. That's always pretty good. Honestly, this card makes sense to me. And we do see a slight spike going up, so good job, Mimicus. Next up, we have the Mastermind. Okay, this one's a little interesting because we did see a dip here, but we did see a buyout happen. 13 copies were bought at an average of 0.027 ETH and spiking now, which is kind of crazy. I don't know if the volume justifies the buyout, though. Also, I mean, the effect is okay. 2 mana at the end of your turn. If this card is in your hand, deal 1 damage to your god for every 2 cards in your hand. And it gets hidden. So you can probably proc this card again unless your opponent has some sort of AoE to deal with it. Or random targeting tools like maybe a Canopy Barrage. But Mind Probe is an interesting card and it deals damage. If you can get it off and your opponent doesn't have an answer to it, it could be annoying. But yeah, 4 mana 1/2 though is kind of weak stats. I don't know if I like that. It just screams easy to answer, so I don't know. But there could be a use for it. I don't know if the volume justifies a buyout though, because it looks like no more than 5 copies have been bought per day. So, and then this person bought 13. So, interesting stuff. Cool. Next up, we have the Hollow. Okay, this card is busted. We see a steady increase in price, honestly, and there's a good reason for it because, yeah, this card is busted. 2 mana, 2/4 with backline and ward. That means it has double protection. If it has a minion, your opponent can attack it, and ward obviously means your opponent can't use spells on it, or it has to use more than 1 spell on it to destroy it. Also, the fact that it can give itself order means it can further protect itself from being attacked, which is very interesting in itself. So it's triple defensive traits. And on top of that, it has it's a 2 mana 2/4. So you can play this card early, and the stat line is very good. 2/4 is probably the standard in Gods Unchained for 2 mana cards, honestly. And yeah, it gives you cards. It gives you resources every turn, essentially, if you give it 2 order every turn, right? So very good card. Can snowball a lot of games. Not surprised by the increase in price here. Next up, we have Lantern Bound Fae. This is your 5 mana 3/4 with order 3. After any creature you control loses order, pull this into your hand and reduce its cost by 1. Roar, deal 3 damage. Yeah, this card is pretty good. 5 mana 3/4 stat wise isn't good. Order wise, it means it's not too good as well because it's probably not going to be attacking anything, unless it like lives long enough. But deal 3 damage battle cry is good, and the fact that you can recycle it at a discounted tempo means you can do a lot. It can have some crazy combos with the Hollow, and yeah, I mean, if you can get these 2 cards working in conjunction together, that'd be great. The only downside is you're only running one of this along with the Hollow, but honestly, it's probably a must include in order decks, which is why we see the price spike here. This also has some implications with Ring of the Siren as well. So, I don't know. Order has a lot of strong tools. Next up, we have Lady Marcella. Yeah, this is 3 mana 3/3, summons 2 rogue skulkers with deadly. It's basically a 3 mana 5/5 because it summons 2 rogue skulkers. If you can find a way to get over the drawback with the Afterlife, you should be okay. I mean, a good way to do that is, God Power Orpheo's Deception. So once Lady Marcella dies on your turn, you just kill one of the rogue skulkers and hopefully trade in with like a weaker minion. But yeah, this card is good. Must include in most Deception decks. Hypnos Puzzle Box. Okay, this one's intriguing because it's a 1 mana. Target creature goes to sleep. Add 2 random runes, anims, or enchanted weapons to each god's hand. Because the runes, anims, and enchanted weapons are cheap cards, and you're giving them both to you and your opponent, it really... I mean, I could see it being a good card. I don't know. It's hard to judge because you could high roll and get like some really powerful runes like Rune of Power, or maybe a powerful anim like, I don't know, the 2/2 with Divine Shield, or maybe the hidden with 3. I don't know. I don't like the enchanted weapons. I don't think they're powerful enough to warrant a 2 mana cost, but I don't know. I think this card is interesting. Target creature goes to sleep. I mean, a 5-head play would be to just... A 5-head play would be to assume that the devs are going to buff all the sleep deception cards, because it's pretty much going to just nuke that genre of deception cards. With Sleep 2.0 is going to nuke that genre of deception cards, but I don't know. That seems like too far of a reach. I mean, this card has potential. Definitely does, because any card, 1 mana card that gives me 2 cards to play for my next couple turns has some implications. And it's also a form of stall, right? Because you're making your opponent's creature, or your creature if you want to, go to sleep. So very interesting card. We do see a price spike here. Only time will tell if this is justified. Cool. So next up we have our Magic cards. Sorry, I said Magic cards. Next up we have our light cards. Gosh, it's been a long day. I think this is the only one though. This is a Bardalis, Parthian Orator, and this is a 3 mana 1/2 with Ward. Roar. This creature gets 1 strength for each enemy creature and 1 health for each other friendly creature. I think for this to be worth its mana, you have to at least have 1 creature or 2 creatures on your side of the field, and like, I mean, it doesn't have to be 2 creatures on your opponent's side of the field. Maybe you can just have 1. A 3 mana 2/4 with Ward sounds okay in my opinion. Of course, it's weaker than the Hollow, but yeah, maybe for a legendary, this should be like a 3/5. A 3/5 would be busted. If you can get this into a 3/5, that'd be amazing. But the condition seems pretty hard unless both you and your opponent are going face and are choosing not to trade. But sometimes that's going to be rare. I don't know. This is a hard condition to... It's not a hard condition to fulfill, but it's definitely like, if you want your mana's worth, I don't think you'll get the 3/5 or the 3/4. You could. I mean, if you have this in hand, you can definitely play around it. You maybe drop like Expectant Chicken turn 1, and then drop a 2-drop turn 2, and then your opponent plays like their minions and stuff like that, and you just decide to go face and ignore, and then he decides to go face. So I mean, that could be a thing, but I don't know. 3 mana 1/2 just feels like weak of stats, and the effect seems very conditional. Yeah, you get Ward, but Why play this card when you can play like something else? I don't know. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think it's a good card. I'm just trying to be hypercritical of it. But it is, wow, 17 copies are bought at an average price of $22.40. It's currently at this 25 level, so interesting stuff. Very interesting stuff. And we do see a steady increase in ETH value, so... Okay, yeah, that was our only light card. Whoopee. So now we're moving on to the Magic cards. So we have a crap ton of Magic cards to go over. There are a couple notable buyouts. I'll just start with 2 main themes. It's going to be ramp and cheap spells. Cheap spells, I mean, Tempo Magic has been a popular deck for the past week or 2 weeks or 2. And Miracle Magic could be a thing in the future with the rework of Oni Spellsword. The 3 mana 1/3 with Ward. So with Oni Spell Sword, it's going to get 1/1 for every spell played, and if that change really happens, those are going to be big implications for cheap 1 mana cost spells in Magic. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. But yeah, ramp and cheap spells, pretty much. First up, we have Cersei, Vengeful Sorceress. This is 7 mana, 3/3, deal 3 damage to each enemy character. 4/3. Card is really good. It's a form of AoE. On a 3/3 body, and you get to 4/3, so you're setting up your next 3 draws. Super good in ramp Magic. It's probably a must include, honestly. We do see a price spike here, which makes sense because, yeah, ramp Magic got a huge buff in terms of getting more stall in cycle, but also getting more viable ramp cards, and also getting like more removal tools such as Lightning Talisman. So very good card. Cersei is going to be a must include in ramp decks for sure. Next up, we have Palace's Wand. After you play a magic card, give +1 durability to this relic. Ability, draw a card, and give -3 durability to this relic. Yeah, this card is really good. It's a draw engine in itself. It's a 1-card draw engine. That's how good it is. Yeah, we did see a buyout here at 0.4 ETH. But the price fluctuation has been a little different. But we have seen, in terms of ETH value, we have seen definitely an increase in price, which is very notable. Okay, next up we have Archimedes' Mirror. This is a price spike here. So this is a 6 mana 1/6. Any damage taken by this creature is also applied to each enemy creature. That's kind of wild. It's been strong for a while, but because ramp is coming back, this card is starting to see play again, and that's why we see the buyouts happening, or at least an increase in price. 6 mana is a great cost for a ramp deck. So, and the fact that this card is just a walking AoE is great. Even if your opponent wants to get rid of it, they're probably going to have to nuke their board in the process, unless they have some form of hard removal, like a Reap, or that 1 mana light spell that obliterates when that creature has order. So yeah, this card is pretty busted. Very good card. Next up, we have a price spike in Lost in the Depths. This is your 1 mana spell, draw a creature. Obliterate cards in your deck with the same cost as that creature and draw a card. Yeah, I think this card is good. Cheap 1 mana spells that draw you a card are going to have a lot of synergy with Runic Familiar, Oni Spellsword, and Archimea. Yeah, it can get pretty crazy. The fact that this can help you thin your deck as well to dig for more powerful cards can also be a factor in things. I just think, yeah, this card can be very good. Very good. Next up, speaking of 1 mana spells, we have Ancient Text. Pick 1, deal 2 damage, or a friendly character becomes protected. This card can serve as a form of burn. It can serve as a form of spot removal. It can serve as a way to protect your minions or a way to protect face. Very good card, very versatile, and you get your money's worth from 1 mana for sure. We do see a price spike here happening, and let's see how that translated in dollars. Yeah, so you see that here, jumped $30 over the past weekend, which is kind of wild. But I mean, it is a good card, and it will see play in some decks. I mean, it's already seeing play in Tempo Mage, really. Speaking of another card in Tempo Mage, this is a Form of Power. 1 mana, deal 2 damage to an enemy creature and 1 damage to your opponent's god. This card spiked pretty significantly over the weekend as well. Also, it's pretty darn good in Tempo Mage because of the spell power. It scales really well with spell power, right? So you play the Scepter, you give a minion 2 spell power. This card does 7 damage total, 4 damage to an enemy creature, and then 3 damage to your opponent's god, all for 1 mana. Yeah, that's kind of ridiculous. No surprise here. Next up, we have a steady increase in Monolith of Storms. This card is also good. It usually serves as a finisher for Tempo Mage, but it's a structure. So it can be played in Structure Mage as well. The fact that it gains 2 strength to this creature it gets 2 strength after you play a card or after you play a spell. That's a lot of value in my opinion. So you play this card, hopefully it lives. If it lives, you get to go off with like as many spells as you can, and then finish your opponent off with this Monolith of Storms. In pinches where you're not going face, you can also use this for removal too, and that can be a value generator in itself. Very good card overall. Not surprised why we see a buff, or why we see a steady increase in price. So I wanted to touch base on this card because although we didn't see any increase in price, we did see a buyout. 16 copies were bought at around like 0.55, 0.0055 ETH right here. So the floor would be the 1426 mark. I think this card has some potential for sure. It's 5 mana, 3/5. Stats are like under average or sub average. Ward makes it okay, gives it some survivability. After you cast a spell that costs 3 or less, refresh 1 mana. That's pretty good, especially if you're using all those 1 mana spells that are in the Magic class. So Form of Power, Ancient Text, Dimension Door. Wow, yeah, that's going to fuel this card for sure. Only time will tell if it'll see play, though. It could see play in decks that try to abuse Runic Familiar and Oni Spellsword, but yeah, we'll have to wait and see. Next up, we have a small price increase with Vortimer the Volatile. It's been consolidating around this 0.005 mark. I think the card is really good. It's another draw engine you can use in Tempo Mage. Tempo Magic, sorry, I keep saying Tempo Mage. That makes me think of Hearthstone. But yeah, overall, I think this card is really good. At the end of your turn, if this creature has 3 strength or more, set it to 1 strength and draw a card. Another thing that this thing can do is attack, unlike Monolith of Storms. I mean, Monolith of Storms can attack, but it'll take you like 5 turns to get to that point. And by that time, if you have Monolith of Storms alive for 5 turns, you should be able to burn your opponent down for game, but I digress. But yeah, this card can also attack, which is kind of nice. 2 mana, 2/3 is decent, and the fact that it replaces itself after you play a spell means, yeah, it's pretty good. Next up, we have Freya. So Freya experienced a buyout on the 27th. 8 mana, 4/7, 4/C2, draw 2 cards, and set their cost to 2. This is obviously for ramp magic. You gotta wait 12 turns to play, but ramp magic cuts the waiting time by a lot. You get to foresee 2 before you draw the 2 cards, so you get to see what you draw, and then from there you get to choose what you discount. That's pretty good. Gets to set you up for future turns, and that can have a lot of good implications. It's basically a massive tempo swing if you can get this out. Cool. Next up, we have Planetar Envoy. So this is a 6 mana 5/6 roar. If you're holding an Aether, select a creature from your opponent's void and add a copy to your hand. I don't really understand why this card spiked. First, 5 mana or 6 mana 5/6 is definitely, I don't know. It's an underwhelming stat line for a card you have to wait 7 turns to play. Excuse me. So I don't know. And then it's also not a very good effect. If you're holding an Aether, select a creature from your opponent's void and add a copy to your hand. Maybe your opponent's playing like some tricked out deck and you can steal like a Jason or a Pyramid Warden. I could see that being a thing. But I don't know. This just seems like a waste of mana to me. Maybe I'm wrong. But yeah. I mean, it has the Aether tag too, but yeah, I don't know. I would love to see more stats. Maybe if this was a 6 mana 7/7, then I'd be like, okay, this is probably worth playing, but I don't know. I don't think it's worth. Okay, next up we have a Spike in Erratic Summons. Summon a copy of a random creature from your opponent's void. Yeah, I don't like this one either. Summon a copy of a random creature. So you don't have a choice, and it's your opponent's void. So your opponent's creatures might not even synergize with your deck. I mean, you could always play this like late game and see if you can high roll a big minion, but yeah, I don't know. This would be infinitely worse against like a zombie deception deck because you'd probably just be summoning zombies the whole time. Zombie deception, I mean zombie death, but you know what I mean. Yeah, anyways, we did see a price spike here. That's all I can say about the card. Dimension Door also found a price spike. This card is nutty, especially if you're running a deck with a really low curve. Usually it's pretty much free mana, a free draw most of the time. Uh, and yeah, it's a good card overall. I think this card will see more play and continue to see play. It's going to see play in tempo magic, but it's also probably going to see play in decks that try to take advantage of the new Oni Spell Sword buff. Cool. Next up, we have Shadow Slash. 4 mana, pick one. Deal 4 damage to a creature or deal 4 damage to your opponent and look at the top 4 cards in their deck. Yeah, the card is good. I think it's basically a poor man's Worm Breath, right? It does 1 less damage, but I mean, you get to see your opponent's next 4 draws, and that could be useful, especially if you're trying to set up lethal for the next turn. So I could see that being a use case, and it's also flexible in a sense where you can use this card to deal 4 damage to another creature, essentially. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it could see use, definitely, especially in heavy burn decks if they need another burn option, but that's all I can say about the card, really. Okay, Staff of Shards received an interesting buyout. 77 copies were bought on January 26. Deal 1 damage, then deal 1 damage to your opponent's god and remove 1 durability from this relic. I honestly think Lightning Talisman is probably a better option now. But the fact that this is 1 mana cheaper and that you can actually choose its an ability makes it a little more valuable, in my opinion. I don't know. It's another form of stall, or it's another form of removal and slash burn. Could be good, could be not good. I mean, it's been decent. I've seen Copper Pitch use this a couple times, really, in his like old iterations of Magic Ramp. So yeah, I mean, it's an interesting card for sure. I think it's good. I think it's decent. Do I think it's busted? No. Are there better options now? Maybe. I really think Lightning Talisman might be a better option at this point. But you can't discount the agency that it gives you, because it really does let you choose who to give what effect on. So that could be nice. Next up, we have Crystal Watcher. 3 mana, 2/3, order 10, unlock a mana lock and deal 1 damage to this creature. We do see another spike, and it's looking like it's settled down to this, let me see, this 28 cent line here. I like the card. I honestly think it should be run in Magic Ramp, because it's a 3 mana card that if your opponent doesn't have any answer to it, it'll net you 2 turns worth of ramp and 3 turns if you get the full effect. And that could be big. Of course, if you don't get it off, you basically just force your opponent to waste removal on this card. But I mean, the drawbacks, or the I guess the trade-offs seem to do well. Like, the reward kind of outweighs the risk with this card. I don't know. I like it. I used to run it at 4 mana, but now that it's at 3 mana, it's kind of busted. Low key. Cool. Next up, we have Lightning Talisman. Okay, cool. So yeah, this card is good. 3 mana, 0/3. We saw second spike happen after the patch notes. What it is, so it's 3 mana, 9 damage, which is good. One of the drawbacks, though, is that you don't really have the agency to control when to proc it. Your opponent does, unless you use the magic god power where you deal 1 damage. So then you can like spend 2 mana to ping your face to activate that effect. But if you do that the whole time, then I don't know, it just feel weird. It's definitely really good against aggro decks, though. This is a very good aggro deterrent because your opponent wants to hit your face, right? So and their minions are so small that they're probably going to die from this card, and you get to proc it 3 times, and that's really strong against aggro. Against control, this might be a little more useless, just because control decks aren't really trying to hit your face. They're actually trying to out-resource you, right? So they'll be focusing on value trading, going on board, and if they, I mean, I'm coming from the standpoint, if I was playing against this card with a control deck, if I was playing against this card with a control deck, I would never proc it unless I knew that I could take the damage and be okay with it, right? So I don't know. Great against aggro, not too crazy against. It's like all right against control. I won't say it's like not bad. It's bad, but it's all right against control. Great against aggro. Cool. 2 mana safeguard incantation. Draw a card. Give Warden protected to your god. Let's see here. Yep. Buyout happened on the 27th. Went ahead and settled down to this mark here. The card is good. I like it. It's a form of cycle and it's a form of stall. And in decks that try to achieve that, like Magic Ramp, for example, where they're trying to stay alive until they can play their powerful cards, this card can definitely see some play. Cool. So now we're going to move on. Let me just check where we're at. Okay, I'm going to do our neutral now. So now we're going on to our nature. I'm going to go ahead and take a water break because that's a lot of talking. All right. So moving on to our nature cards. Next up we have Selena, Champion of Nature, 4 mana, 3/4, backline ward, roar. Creatures lose confusion. Ability, deal 2 damage to an enemy, then confuse a random enemy creature. This card can be a lot of value. The fact that it has backline and ward means it's a double like defensive trait, which means it can be pretty hard to like remove, especially if you're running a creature-based deck that summons a lot of minions early game. Yeah, it's good in nature, good in big beast nature. I think this card, the increase in volumes reflects that for sure. I think one of the top performers this weekend also ran Selena. I forgot who, but it was definitely a big beast nature deck. So yeah, and it's also an Amazon, so there's some synergy there, right? Okay, next up we have Photogenesis, and this card spiked a lot. Add 4 random nature cards to your hand, refresh 6 mana, 7 mana card. Honestly, yeah, this card is pretty good. I like it. It'd probably be run in control variants though, because the card is way too slow to be run in aggro. Maybe it can be run in mid-range, but yeah, I think this card, I mean, you're basically paying 1 mana to get 4 cards, and then you have 6 mana left to play whatever you want. So yeah, that can be pretty powerful in the right deck for sure. Next up we have Proud Conscriptor. This is a 4 mana 2/3 with Afterlife, summon 2 1/1 Amazon recruits. This is an Amazon itself. We do see a price spike here. 4 mana 2/3 is very underwhelming, but a 4 mana 4/5 is pretty good. I mean, the fact that it just, keeps you with Amazons on the board can be a benefit. It's just very weak as a 4 mana card, but I could see why it could be used. There's some potential to be used in Amazon decks too. Or Amazon. Oh god, talking's hard. This has a lot of potential to be used in Amazon decks. Haha, Jaguar Staff. Alright. I like this card. If you've been watching the channel or if you've been following me out for a while, relics with Blitz and God Blitz are really good because they offer an immediate tempo swing. And this card just is tempo swing all around, right? 2 attack and 2 durability is kind of underwhelming for a 5 mana card, but you get to summon a Black Jaguar, 2 mana 3/3. And it's pretty good. Like in an ideal situation, you play this card, you kill off one of your opponent's minions, and you have a 2 mana 3/3 on board, right? And then you get to do that again the next turn. So, I think the card is very good, and we do see a spike here, and I'm not surprised why. Trial of the Hydra did see some buyouts. I think this card, well, obviously this is the finisher for regen decks, right? Give regen to each of your wild creatures, then give all your creatures XX, where X is their regen amount. If you're playing the Burning Talisman or the Flaming Talisman, one of those, the Nature Talisman, this card is probably a must. after I'm done with my tournament prep, I'm excited to try out some variations of like regen nature because yeah, there's some potential there. Blazing Talisman doesn't lose durability when it procs its effect, so there's some there's some implications there. But anyways, yeah, we do see a price spike here. We do see a buyout. Let's see where it's at now. It's at 1853. Yeah, so yeah, that's the reason why I'm using the ETH instead of dollars is because when you use dollars, it actually reflects how Ethereum has been doing in the market, and I want to just look at the card. So by looking at Ethereum, or by checking the price in Ethereum, you get to see, or it's a more true identifier of how a card is performing. Okay, yeah, this one was interesting. Selena's Insight got a buyout for 192 copies at 16.0001641 ETH. Jumped from $2 to $14. Holy bejeebus. Is it going to hold? I'm not too sure if it's going to hold, but we'll see. Because the volume says otherwise. But there's probably something that happened over the weekend that might have spiked it. So this is a 6 mana. Target one of your creatures to attack a random enemy creature. If your creature survives and the enemy creature dies, destroy all enemy creatures. That's honestly pretty crazy. Target one of your creatures to attack a random enemy creature. If you do this with a big beast, it can definitely like clear the board. Yeah, I mean it's a pretty good spell in my opinion. Could be very good use. Could find some very good use in nature, especially the slower nature decks like control nature. So yeah, very interesting form of removal, but very powerful, at least from first glance. Falling Star. Okay, so a lot of big beast nature decks have been winning weekend ranked, or have been doing really well in weekend ranked. I believe we had like 7 nature decks, something like that, 2 weeks ago. And there are a couple of nature decks that did well this week as well. And Falling Star is a good card. It's basically a form of removal, but it's also a form of buff, like board buff. Give your opponent's strongest creature burn 6, summon 3 1/2 badgers with confuse. Your creatures gain +1 strength. Yeah, you summon 3 2/2s. Although they have confused, you get to kill your opponent's creature, hopefully. And yeah, you get to buff any other minions that you have on board. I'm not surprised at the price spike. Do I think it's going to go up even more? I mean, time will tell. Time will tell. Cool. Next up, we have Sirene's Blessing. This is your 2 mana. Each friendly creature gets regen 2. This has some implications in regen nature. We do see a spike here. Let's see. What do we get? Get a whopping $1 to $3.46 back down to $2.70. Now it's hovering at that $3 range. Yeah, that's pretty good. That's about like a 100% price increase since it was at like 150-ish. Yeah, I mean it could have some implications in regen nature. Only time will tell. If someone like discovers it and does well with it, maybe this will see more of a spike. Next up, we have Moonlight Charm. This card also received a change over the last week. It did see a spike on the 29th. So now the ability procs not with Frenzy, but it just procs pretty much on your turn. Last time I think it procced at the end of the turn, which had some implications, but now that the effect is an ability, it's a lot slower. It's still a good effect though. You just won't be able to buff a minion right away like how you used to. Okay, so Frenzied Ritual saw a spike. This is a 4 mana, deal 12 to a random enemy creature and to a random friendly creature. Add a random nature card to your hand. Yeah, dealing 12 damage for 4 mana is really good. And, I mean, if you're okay with destroying your own minion in the process and replacing that minion with a nature card, then, yeah, this is some pretty potent removal. Honestly, yeah, 4 mana, 12 damage. Wow. Wild. Nature spells deal so much damage. It's kind of crazy. Next up, we have Starving Sabertooth. This is a 4 mana 4/5. After this creature attacks a creature, if you are frenzied, gain +1 regen. This card has some implications in regen nature, but also big beast nature. 4 mana 4/5 is a decent stat line for sure. And yeah, I mean, if it's frenzied, you get 1 nature and regen, or 1 regen, sorry. And regen scales really well when the minion has like a lot of health. So that makes sense. Cool. And next we have Blazing Talisman. 2 mana 0/1. After an enemy creature attacks your god, give it burn +1. When a creature with burn dies, give your creatures +1 regen. Yeah, I think this card has some potential because, I mean, it's basically a thing that just lasts forever, right? Until your opponent deals with it with like some kind of weapon removal. But yeah, it can also be an aggro deterrent in some cases, which is really nice. I mean, the card is looking pretty good in my opinion. Cool. Next up we have Snapping Turtle. This is your 6 mana 6/2 with armor 2. At the end of your turn, give +2 armor to this creature. At the start of your turn, it loses 2 armor. Yeah, I like the card. Armor 2 is such a strong like stat line, and then the fact that it gets armor 4 during your opponent's turn will make this card very hard to kill. They'll need 6 damage to kill this card. And anything else probably won't work. So yeah, it's either they do 6 damage 1 time or 5 damage 2 times, and that's kind of nutty to me. But yeah, we do see a price spike here. Not surprised. Cheapest you can get it at is what? 29 cents. Ooh, wow, 29 cents. Crazy. Next up we have Spring's Harvest. Add 2 random nature cards to your hand. If you're frenzied, add 3 instead. This is a form of refill. I think the card is okay. It's definitely has its merits, especially if you're playing a very fast deck that wants to needs to refill their hand in the later stages of the game. So I could totally see that. We do see an increase in activity, and the price has gone up by like what? Whoa. Sorry. The price has gone up by what? Oh, not that much. It's just an increase in ETH, which was kind of interesting to me. Cool. All right, next up, we have our war cards. So, first up, we have Odin, Endless War. Before I get into this card, let me go ahead and take another swig of water. Ah, yes, stay hydrated, y'all. So, 8 mana 5/5. At the end of each turn, summon a Foolhardy Berserker. Roar pick 1. Give 5/3 to a friendly creature, or give 3/10 to a random creature in your hand. Yeah, that's pretty crazy. Honestly, 3/10 is a big stat line. 8 mana 5/5 though is kind of weak. It's no, not kind of. It's really weak. But I mean, at least you get to summon a Foolhardy Berserker, and then you get to pick one of these effects to buff minions. So it could potentially be a 10-8 or a 8-15 worth of stats, and then plus a Foolhardy Berserker. So that's pretty decent in my opinion. We do see a buyout here happening around the 25th and the 26th, and we do see a little bit of a consolidation here at this 0.47 price point. Ah, yes. Warmonger Smith. 2 mana 2/4. Give your relic +1 strength for its attack. It's definitely gone down, but the volume's still up because it's still a good card. In my opinion, I mean, it's definitely not as broken as before. I'm going to miss playing Enduring Shield and then playing this card and then hitting my opponent for 3, or trading my creature for 3. Or trading my relic for 3. Sorry, talking's hard. But I do think this card is still good. It's a shame that we see a price drop, but hey, that's good for newer players too, you know? It's also a core card, so, I mean, it's not easy to pull because it's still an epic, but it's still a core card, so you should be able to find or get some if you're free to play. Just have to grind a little bit. Alrighty, and that was it for the war cards. Now we're going to move on to our final group, which is the neutral cards. So, How the Mighty Have Fallen. Mr. Good Old Demogorgon, the Bitcoin of Gods Unchained. I'm just kidding. I don't want to call it the Bitcoin of Gods Unchained, but it was definitely the one of the pillars of like the most expensive cards. It's gone all the way down to 1830. It looks like it's settled in on this level though, because it's the cheapest you can find it at is 869, which is nice. Nice. Yeah. It's nice. Sorry, I said nice out of habit. But anyways, so we do see a lot of volume today. Obviously, it's because of the Sleep 2.0 changes. Only time will tell whether or not Sleep 2.0 kills the Demogorgon or not. But, I mean, Mass Sleep is a really powerful effect. Demogorgon is one of the few creatures that have Leech as well. And, yeah, there's going to be more counterplay, but I mean, it's still a good card in my opinion. So, yeah, we'll just have to wait and see how sleep affects it. Cool. Next up is That Which Aches. This is your 6 mana 3/7. After you play a card, summon a 3/1 Aching Disciple with Roar. Draw a card. Afterlife, shuffle this creature into your deck. Yeah, this card is very good in the Fatigue matchup, especially if you're playing a control deck. It essentially allows you to go infinite, right? Play this card and then play like 2 or 3 cards after that. You're never going to go into Fatigue ever, unless your opponent is a wizard. Just kidding. I don't know why I said that. But anyways, yeah, I think this card is pretty good. Like, it has a very specific use case, but a very useful use case too. You could see this card, if you're expecting a lot of control deck matchups that go into Fatigue, you run this card. Next up, we have Balance Summoner. So this is your 2 mana 2/3. Set the mana cost of all anims, enchanted weapons, and runes in your hand to 1. We do see a price here. Wow, not bad. A little bit of a gap in buying, but it looks like the market has accepted this price point. It went from $21 all the way to $26. A little bit of more of a raise in ETH. Yeah, this card can grant you an insane amount of tempo, especially if you have a ton of cards, a ton of runes, anims, and enchanted weapons into your hand. Farside Explorer also received a buyout. Which is interesting, but I mean, it didn't really change the price in ETH. Let's see how it changes in US dollars. Yeah, it didn't really change, but I just wanted to make a note here. Someone's buying out this card. It's a Genesis Epic. Roar. Replace your hand with copies of Voyage to the Farlands. What's Voyage to the Farlands do again? Here we go. Voyage to the Farlands. Gods Unchained. Oh, look at that. Beautiful. What does this card do? This card, delve a random creature and put it into your hand. Oh, and it's 1 mana. That's not bad. Dang. So you're placing your hand with copies of Voyage to the Farlands. I mean, it could be pretty interesting. It's definitely a meme-worthy card, that's for sure. Yeah, and you can run 2 of in your deck, so... yeah, okay, I can kind of see that. It can also have some synergies, like if you're playing Oni Spellsword, right? Like, you turn your hand into Voyage of the Farlands and just play all those 1 mana spells. That's fun. That sounds like meme, but I mean, there's probably something there. Also, 2 mana 1/5 is actually kind of decent. A kind of decent stat line. That's basically 6 stats for 2 mana. Of course, you'd want a little more in the strength category, but 6 stats for 2 mana isn't bad. Cool. Amputation Magus. Backline. When a friendly creature dies, add a random rune to your hand. Okay, so we're seeing a couple patterns here. Someone's buying out the rune cards, and that's pretty interesting. 5 mana 2/4 with backline. Stat line is very bad. Backline is backline is okay, but the 5 mana 2/4 just feels like a waste of a 5 mana card, really. If I'm playing this on curve, I'm just it's bad. And then it wants you to kill creatures, right? So you play this card and you try to ram all your creatures and get a shit ton of runes, but then you're left with a 2/4. I don't know. I mean, there could definitely be some use cases here. I'm probably just being like super pessimistic as I always am, but I think this card can be okay, but I'm definitely leaning on the why would you buy this card? Yeah. But anyways, I mean, there could be some use cases for it. Who knows? I'm not an expert on the rune cards, or I'm not an expert on rune decks. But hey, man, if a rune deck pops up in the meta and this card becomes like a must include, which I highly doubt, you know, maybe this buyout could be justified. Ooh, Venerable Griffin. 2 mana 3/4 wild, protected, cannot attack. Okay, so this is an interesting card because it can attack, but it has protected. So it automatically makes me think of cards that want to give it frontline. And there are a couple in the light class that can do this for me, but I don't know if there's anything else that can really do this, like give a creature frontline. But I mean, if we get something like a card in the future that grants frontline to minions, and maybe it's a neutral card, or maybe it's another card from another class, this can definitely see play. This can definitely see play in light too. Yeah, giving a card frontline is pretty interesting. But yeah, we do see a price spike here. 28 copies were bought at an average price of what? $383. Now you see it at $524. Wow. So that's pretty interesting to me. Definitely an interesting card to buy. I mean, I would play it if there are more cards that gave frontline. If like this would be a card you can build a deck around, but I don't know. I digress. And maybe if there's a card that can silence, right? Like I'm pretty surprised that there's no silence in Gods Unchained. There's only transform. But then if you give this card silence, man, this card would be amazing, right? Because you silence it, it loses its cannot attack. It obviously loses its protected, but it's a 2 mana 3/4, which is pretty good value. And it's wild. So yeah, I don't know. Do what you must with that information. Inflammable Imbecile. 1 mana 2/4 would burn 1. I like this card. It's a 1 mana 2/4. Yeah, you're probably. It's only gonna. It's actually a 1 mana 2/3, considering the burn effects, but I mean it's still a 1 mana 2/3. Another Wild Hog sees play. The Netherborn Spider sees play. This card can also see play. I could also see this card having some synergy with like heal cards or cards that damage itself. Maybe you play this with Burning Talisman, and you play this on turn 1, Burning Talisman turn 2. It finally dies on turn 3, and you play a minion. Maybe that could be a thing. I don't know. But I mean, I like the stat line. It's a 1 mana 2/4, and then if you can find a way to mitigate or take advantage of the burn effect, there's a lot of potential there. Vow of Champions received a buyout. It's a very versatile card. 2 mana, draw a card, or gain 7 favor, or deal 2 damage, or heal your god for 4. You're probably never going to gain 7 favor unless you find like lethal in the Sanctum, which you can, or protection in the Sanctum. But yeah, I think most of the time you're going to either use it as removal, cycle, or heal, depending on the opportunity. But I think it's a very versatile card. It did see a jump. Let's see how much it jumped in dollars. It jumped $250 almost, which is crazy, and now it's settling around this $3 mark. So, interesting stuff. Next up, we have Midnight Cat. This card saw a spike on the 27th and is falling back down to its original price. Sorry, I'm about to burp. Okay, cool. Excuse me. But yeah, 1 mana, 2/2, flank. Give a friendly creature flank. 1 mana, 2/2 is alright. Flank is okay. I mean, this would help in a face deck for sure. Or like in a very aggressive deck. It's a 1 mana wild card. And it has synergy with Crescent Werewolf. The 2 mana 2/2 that when you summon a wild creature, you gain another mana. So that's pretty interesting. That's all I can say, really. I don't have too much an opinion about this card other than that, like it's average, really. But yeah, could see some play in wild decks. Dragon Tooth Warrior. This is a 5 mana 3/3. After this creature survives damage, summon a copy with half health, rounded down. This is your poor man's Patron Warrior for all my Hearthstone fans out there. Not good. Not as good as its Hearthstone counterpart, at least, because Patron Warrior was kind of busted. This card, you deal damage to it. Its copy is a 5 mana 3/1, and that's really. But we do see a little bit of a spike here. People are buying these copies. I mean, it's a Genesis rare, so it could find value, but honestly, 5 mana 3/3 that has a potential of summoning a 3/1 and doesn't have a potential of like summoning itself. I don't know. It feels very underwhelming. You can also heal it. There's the option to heal it and then deal damage again, but that's just too many steps. Like, you kind of just want like 1-2 steps to keep it consistent, you know? But yeah, that's pretty much it. I have no other opinion on that card. Ruthless Kaipora is a 5 mana 3/3 Amazon. This creature gains 1/1 for each friendly creature. So yeah, it did see a little bit of an increase in volume on the 29th, and it spiked. It's been spiking today. Do I like this card? Well, it's 5 mana. So in order for this to be worth my mana, I'd probably want it to be a 6/6. Meaning I'd want at least 3 minions on the board when I play this. If I'm playing an Amazon Swarm deck, this seems like very possible. So I could see this seeing play in Amazons for sure, or in a Swarm deck in general. But it definitely, for it to be worth my mana, it'd have to be it'd have to be 3 minions. Yeah, maybe 2 minions at least. But if I'm playing a 5 mana 4/4 or a 5 mana 3/3 on curve, that just feels bad in my opinion. So it's a little bit situational for me, but I could see like certain decks making it work. Okay, yeah, next up we have a Veteran Archer. 4 mana 2/3, deal 1 damage to 2 enemy creatures. You may select the same creature twice. We did see a buyout here, which is pretty interesting. It's a core set card, so it's really easy to get. It's a rare too. I don't know. Like, I feel like you can just grind as an F2P player and get this card. So I don't understand the buyout. Maybe there's some arbitrage here that I'm not seeing. But yeah, I don't know. It's a very interesting buy. And then finally, our last card is our Ranger First Bow. This is 2 mana 2/2 Roar. Deal 1 damage to an enemy creature. It's also an Olympian. We do see a little more activity here. It's looking like an arbitrage thing for sure, but I think it might be an arbitrage thing. Like, maybe someone's just like switching, increasing like the trades between this. But yeah, anyways, the card is good. I think the 1 mana 1/2 that deals 1 damage is a little bit better, but I mean, this card is okay in my opinion. It's core set though, so why would anyone want to I don't think it's so easy to pull in the core set. It's a common too, so yeah. But anyways, yeah, someone's probably like trying to trade between Gods and ETH for this. Anyways, yeah, I have nothing else to say here. It's a core card. It's really easy to get. That's pretty much it. Cool. And that is this Monday's Market Watch. Thank y'all for tuning in. Like I said, if you have any thoughts on any of these cards, feel free to join in this discussion or start a discussion in the comments section. Yeah. Yeah. Having a nice discussion, having some talks about the game. That's always a fun part for me. I enjoy it personally, and maybe we can learn something from each other. But other than that, thanks for tuning in. I'll see y'all next time, and hope you have a great afternoon, morning, or evening, depending on when you're watching this. Peace, y'all. Bye.